So, hello. Welcome to tonight's Loops session. Loops is our event series here at New Practice, initiated by the Berlin University Alliance and supported by the project Zukunft of the State of Berlin. My study here at Design and Computation, and together with my co-host Meric, I'll be moderating tonight. We're welcoming Judith Dörrenbächer, Alessandro Mac-Nelly, and Andreas Muxel, who join us for a conversation on human-robot interactions. For those who have never been here, the loop functions in a way that this is essentially a timer. Each speaker has 15 minutes, and this will indicate how much time is left. And after each input, there's going to be 5 minutes for quick understanding questions, clarifications, this kind of thing, and then we move on to the next speaker for another 15 minutes and so on. And at the end we have another 5-minute session and then open up for a 15-minute of overall conversation. I think we'll get started, so if you could introduce the first speaker.
Thank you. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Andreas Muxel. He's a designer and educator working at the intersection of computation, materiality, and speculative design. He currently serves as a professor of design at the University of Applied Sciences, Augsburg, where he leads the Interaction Lab, and his research examines the physical manifestation of digital processes and explores the aesthetics of human-machine co-agency. Muxel's projects range from hybrid installations and experimental interfaces to pedagogical tools and critical prototypes. His work has been exhibited internationally and featured in publications including Form, Holo, and We Make Money, Not Art. Thank you, and great to have you here.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, good evening. First of all, thank you, Marc, for the invitation, and also Albert Lang, I think, here. Yeah, thank you. And also thanks to the organization team for the event. And today I will talk about robotic things and how to prototype the otherness of things that are neither human or living beings. So I have a background as an interaction designer and artist, and as you already mentioned, right now I'm at the Technical University of Applied Sciences in Augsburg at the Faculty of Design, where I also run the Hybrid Things Lab, exploring human-machine interactions together with our students and researchers. And the lab has a strong focus on embodied interaction with acting things, things in between the physical and the non-physical, things in between the irrational and the rational, or maybe the magic. We will see. And we follow research through design approach, and here we understand prototypes not just as pre-versions for later implementation, but also as research artifacts. And currently we have a strong focus on embodiment and behavior of robotic things to support also kind of pseudo-social interactions, I will call it. So if we look in our culture, at least in the Western culture, we have always been developing tools as an extension of the self to become more efficient, to become better, to become stronger. But with the rise of autonomous and also robotic systems, technology is also perceived as something other, as a proactive counterpart. And instead of controlling, we also start to cooperate with technology. And in our coexistence, we ascribe almost human qualities, emotions and liveliness to our technical counterpart, but the robot as a rational machine is something else. And the question is, how might these things be designed to something else, to something proactive, and even maybe at something social? So how can we shape their thingness beyond imitating human being, because they are something else? So what is a robot? First of all, I think robots are manifestations of our rational thinking, and to create repeatability, efficiency, power, and control. And the robot can sense its environment, it computes decisions based on a sensory information, and act on these decisions through mechanical or electronic means. And this is actually, I think, quite nice description from a text from James Auger, I think he's pronounced. It's a Living with Robots, a speculative design approach. I really recommend to read this text. So in industry and production, robots replace the working hands. So As we see on the left side, robots are very strong, fast, and more efficient than the human labor, and they do not get tired, they do not make mistakes, and will never start a rebellion. Also in the sense of the origin of the Czech word robota, which means forced labor. But maybe in the near future, robots might also become co-actors in our daily lives and finding their ways into typical human environments. And we already see different approaches to integrate them also as social or kind of social entities. For example, on the right side, we see the Huggibot 3.0. So it's by researchers of the Max Planck Institute. And right now you don't see it, but I can tell you something. I hope the screen is coming back. Yes. So actually the researchers tried to teach a robot to give hugs. And they also did a study with several participants to look, is it accepted to get touched or hugged by a robot? And interestingly, the people said that they kind of felt more comfortable to hug the robot very long instead of hugging a human being, because normally when you hug someone, it can happen that you always have the feeling, is it too long for the other person? And here it's clear, it's a machine, I can do it as long as I want. So this was kind of interesting, maybe, I don't know, we can discuss. But the emotional experience takes place only on the human side, of course. I mean, the robot has no emotions, it's just a technology, and it acts only on the basis of some rules inside. So, but why do we always interpret so much into these machines than that they actually are? So using now, in the next slides, I want to use examples from design education research, where I try to give very subjective insights based on practical explorations and observations. So in her project, Artificial Emotions, the student Giulia Alfeo drew a reference to the principle of the famous vehicles of Valentino Breitenberg. Some of you might know them. So the Breitenberg vehicles, it's a very simple input-output relation. So a motor of a wheel of a kind of robot is directly wired to a light sensor in front of it, and by that you can control each motor. So depending how you wire it, the robot drives to the light or drives away from the light. So it's a very simple algorithm actually. And in her documentation video, Giulia even attributes emotions to the robotic thing, like curious, fear, love, and aggression. And the work also shows that we tend to discover the human aspect in the artificial counterpart. And even knowing this is not true. So we tend to interpret self-moving artifacts to have agency, autonomy, and intention. And even their behavior is just based on simple input-output relations like here. So self-moving principles can support interactions of human and machine. And in a study, Bartnick and others suggest that for the perception of a robot's autonomy, the behavior is more important than its body. So this also influences how we interact with the robotic thing. The lamp Viviana by the students Fabian Schäfer and Joy Okawa shows that even a non-anthropomorphic machine triggers the perception of a kind of social entity. The perceived agency plays an important role in our treatment of the artifact, in this case the lamp. Yeah, and in the end it's just a man inside the machine becoming the lamp. And this is actually a quite good also kind of method to do it, and I also use a lot in design education to play the machine and not using any complicated technology to do it. Another example is the bachelor project Not a Box by the student Matthias Sierch, where he explored how a box can express itself just by the way it moves. So in the beginning, Matthias explored different ways of animating the box by playing it like a puppeteer. So again, not use of complex technology, just hands and material. So he's playing the robot to get first insights, first experiences. And then the next step, he developed a final prototype that can sense humans and react to them. And underneath, it's quite complicated, a lot of technology. And interacting with the box, we associate, again, emotions such as joy, fear, or anger in an object that has no emotions. And even its shape is very abstract, we tend to interpret the robot's behavior as on an affective level and attribute kind of liveliness into the thing. I think 3 years ago, we had a project together with students from Augsburg and researchers from the Experience and Interaction Design group of the University of Siegen. It's actually the research group where also Judith is working. And in the project Chairness of a Chair, the students investigated how an autonomous proactive technology also changes social interactions. And they came up with the idea of robotic chairs that can autonomously change their position and thus also the position and perspective of the person sitting on them. So we were exploring questions like, what if a chair turns away during a conversation? What if a chair drives me to a stranger person? What if a chair takes control without being asked? In the beginning, again, they started to perform the chairs, to play the chairs, and to perform certain scenarios in a very analog way. So, for example, a chair was put in front of the wall, or two chairs were arranged in a meeting of two strangers. And in the next step, the students had to find a way to prototype this robotic chair, because actually it's not that easy to drive someone around in the room when you don't have much money. But they found a way, because you might know the hoverboards. And actually, out of the Chaos Computer Club community, there is a firmware hack for the hoverboards, which you can hack the system, and then you can drive it with other software. So it's a very cheap way to drive people around in the room. And out of that, with this prototype, it was possible to come up with further scenarios, and I just show a short movie. So this was a scenario of two chairs in the room, and thinking about, how is it if the chair offers you something, or if the chair helps you to start a conversation? Or what happens if a chair interrupts the conversation? And robotics is still a very technical task. So therefore, in our lab, we developed the open source toolkit RoboData to overcome technical obstacles and explore human-robot interactions in a very playful way. So the toolkit offers a playful approach to design this relationship also with these technical counterparts. So it's a web-based interface which allows you to move a two-axis robot, and also to save these movement patterns. And in the next step, you can also assign these movement patterns to kind of facial expressions. And of course, this form of measurement of face has to be discussed very critically. And actually what we do is we just put the emoji on your face. So we also make clear it's not really emotion what you detect, it's just kind of a abstraction. It's just something the machine is able to measure, but it's not emotion, it's just playing facial expressions. That's it. And what's more interesting, I think, in this toolkit is that you can extend the robot by using very different simple materials, straws, paper. Gaffer tape is a very important tool, I would say, very good tool. And then you can start playing with the body of the robot and play and experience different things of, for example, this was a workshop I did with students from the HBK Saar in the Saar University of Fine Arts. So on the left side we see some explorations of a soft body. How does it feel if something soft is moving? To which way do I accept it? So it's a very personal feeling, first of all, but something you can experience. Or on the other side there was like a rigid body where you can experience how does it feel if it starts touching you but also kind of hitting you. So this was just an afternoon workshop, I think 2 or 3 hours, but that's the kit is actually just meant for that, to have 2 or 3 hours to do something. Or we did stuff like that to hide the technology, to put some fabric or some fur around it. And yeah, just as you see, it's in the end, it just needs some movement and maybe just some non-linear movement, and immediately you see so much things in that objects. And actually, it's just 2 servo motors moving. That's it. We also use it for workshops with kids. This was a workshop in Munich at the Museum Brandhorst in their kids factory, because they had an exhibition called Future Bodies. And there we had a workshop with kids to experience and explore different kind of robotic bodies. And yeah, one kid just put the robot inside the garbage can, which was also interesting. So yeah, and last autumn I was also at the Milieu Institute in Montreal, which was also quite interesting what the people did there with the robots. Yeah. So there are different ways to explore it, and we always use this as a starting point to discuss it then in the next step. Yeah. So recently we also developed a custom script in our lab to control a very kind of, I would say, quite complicated robot arm from Universal Robot, using open sound control as an interface. So it's you can use different tools to control it. For example, touch design or processing, or whatever you want. And last semester I used this also for the first time for a course called Creative Robotics, and where the students designed or explored different ways of human-robot interactions. And one project was RoboScience by the students Saskia Schleicher and Gabriel Seibold. Here the robot becomes a physical medium between 2 worlds of the rational and the irrational, the material, the immaterial, or maybe even the spiritual. So by the robot you were able to talk to someone else. And then another project was In Touch by the students Kevin Wells and Leon Gunzelius, and there it was the idea to use the robot as an interface to connect people over distance. So for example, if the grandma wants to talk to the boy here, she can put on the glasses and call him. And through the robot, yeah, we can discuss it maybe later. Yeah, I think you get it. So I now will come to an end, because I think I'm now finished, right? Yeah, okay. So we should understand robotic things not just as technical systems, but also as something influencing and changing our social behavior. And I think design disciplines will play a significant role in shaping these things. And in general, I understand design as an interface discipline between disciplines. So future work has to be done in collaboration with other disciplines like computer scientists, engineers, psychologists, sociologists, artists, and so on. I think it's a topic a lot of disciplines are needed for that. To shape meaningful, maybe meaningful robotic affairs. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Now we have 5 minutes for any kind of questions you guys might have. Do you have anything you didn't understand? Anything you want to further inquire about? Yes, Mavich?
Fantastic stuff, fantastic stuff. I really like the man on the table. So how much does it have to be a robot as an algorithmically controlled? And how much does it just need to be a person on the table pulling strings? Because it does the same thing, right? And we have, like, if there's like a hand under the carpet doing the movements, or like a cat, or I don't know, something, how much do you actually need what you started off with, these algorithmic, repeatable computational sets?
A good question. I think to create an experience, you don't need the technology. You can use the man or the woman in the box. It's working. And it's also working. I think what's also interesting is that that also for the person in the box, it at least get kind of a perspective of the machine. I mean, there in the back there is this car. I just saw it before, which is called How to Become a Self-Driving Car. It's the same principle there. You were sitting in the car having Google VR glasses, and then you get the perspective of just the sensor data of a car to get an idea what is a car experiencing. So I think on two levels. It's first of all, regarding your question, I think to create the experience, the high tech maybe most of the time is not needed. And on the other side, I think this kind of doing it like that, it also offers a perspective, maybe another perspective for the guy sitting inside the box.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
Can you see if there is some difference with the latest advancement, like with machine learning, whether it had influenced this kind of human-robot interaction in the last 5 years, or it has been like a little bit constant in the way how you develop a kind of project?
It has changed a lot. So, I mean, also if you come to very applied stuff, I was just recently at KUKA. KUKA is one of the biggest robot companies worldwide from Augsburg. And for them, it plays a big role now how you teach a robot, not by programming the robot, but by showing the robot what to do. And he learns by showing it to him. I think here you learn a lot. And of course, the whole sensing environment. Their machine learning is very good, I think, to find patterns there. So I think it changed a lot. But I think right now there's still a lot of hype and promises which are not really there. Interesting part, for example, is the collaborative robots, where also KUKA are also selling collaborative robots. And the initial starting point was that we start to collaborate with robots and working with robots. And they told me actually it's not really happening. So most of the people just buy these robots because they are quite easy to program, but you don't use this robot to collaborate with them.
You had another question? Do you want to pass the...
Sorry, it's going to be rather a philosophical question, but you started with this parenthesis, at least in the Western culture. Mm-hmm. So is the problem only occurring in the Western culture because we have this distinction between the living, the non-living, the animated and non, and you know, the acceptance of caretaking robots in Japan is a much higher one, or is not a problem at all? So did you ever consider that in your reflections on the
project? Yeah. I mean, it's, I also realized that, for example, the robot data workshop I also did in different cultures, and it's different. It's different how people deal with it, how people, yeah. But of course, my perspective is this perspective of our culture. But yeah, I think Judith is more into that topic. I don't know what you will tell there later.
Yeah.
Let's move this to the end of the talk and then we can, yeah? Okay, then I suggest we move on. Then I'm going to introduce Alessandro Mac-Nelly. He is an art-based researcher working with robotics, machine learning, and AI-driven visual systems. With a background in architecture, he completed his master in design and computation here at UDK and TU Berlin, and is now a research associate. Recently, he has focused on media didactics and the pedagogical potential of AI and robotics. He's a co-founder of the ACV research project, for which he was awarded the Ars Electronica Campus Award in 2024. Current exhibitions and conferences include the Bauhaus Archiv, BLMK Cottbus, DA Fest 25 in Sofia, and the Infos 2025 conference. Welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. So I don't need to say anything more about myself, but I can rather just dive into myself, to the robot arm and into the research project that I'm doing here at New Practice. And so first of all, it started out as that I wanted to really learn how to draw. And I thought, which better way to do it than to get a robot and AI to teach myself how to do it. And this question very quickly became into a question what the technical interface of this collaboration might look like. And in the beginning, we tried to yeah, similar to what Andreas said, that you simulate the robot and you start by two humans drawing with each other. And that's what you also see in these 4 steps. So it started out as 2 humans, and it's very, very interesting when 2 humans draw together. So we set a rule so to mimic the robot interaction, and it was, you're not allowed to talk about what you're going to draw. And the only communication that is allowed is through the turns and the strokes that you do on the canvas itself. And what we found out, there was a very interesting phenomena, that it became a narration on the paper. So people quickly started to draw a house, then it came to the tree, then the apples, and then most oftentimes the Alps. And when we moved this interaction first into a digital interface, so that's the second step, you see we have the mouse and a screen, and you start with the first turn you make, and you press a button, and then you get the answer of the algorithm in that case. And you start to see that the humans, they don't care about if it's fun for the robot, but much rather if it's more fun for them. So they start to test the algorithm, what it wants to do and how it will react. And with already this kind of shift that we saw in this project, we wanted to dive further in and play with this. And so it became, the next iteration, it became a pen plotter as the physical manifestation of the algorithm. And already when you start drawing with this machine, it becomes more like a social gathering or an event that people start to be around it and to comment what they see and to ask themselves, what is this machine doing? And then the 4th iteration of this project, and this what I currently brought, is Algorithmic Cultural Vandalism, is the robotic arm here. We had this robotic arm, we added it, and it even, the noise that it makes with the servo motors and the gestures, it gave it a much more physical embodiment and actually kind of a personality, so much that we had to give it a name. And when we're talking about we, it's always me and Pietro Lugaro, who is also part and co-founder of this research project. We call it Gunther. And actually, when talking about it, I would love someone to try it out live here in the setting. Is there anyone who wants to interact with this robot? Yeah? So you can sit on the chair if you like, and I will give you a new sheet of paper. So the rules are very simple. So you start with the first turn, so it could be anything, a line, a form, a shape. Feel free, see it as a question to the robot. Whatever you want. Okay, then there's the button to your right, you can press it. Let's see if it, did you press it? Yeah, perfect. So what happens now, the robot arm has a camera and it looks at the image, and it takes the physical representation of something that is there and puts it into a binary image, into bits and bytes, and this algorithm now has to try to understand what the human person sitting here with a cultural background, with technique, with knowledge and skills, you can push it right here. That's part of the collaboration actually, to guide the robot also in the process. And yeah, this problem of what is the robot seeing and what is the human actually seeing and intending to do is part of this collaboration. So now I will ask you something when the robot is done. What do you kind of think what the robot is doing and what its intention is? It tries to generate something of meaning, symbolic, could be from the nature, and yeah.
So what I think the robot will, So I was, from my work, I have a design problem, and I try to ask the robot to help me to design it, but now it's a different image for me. Like, I had some specific idea in my mind when I was drawing this easy shape, and now that the robot drew something very different, I'm seeing a different picture. But that's my interpretation, not what the robot was doing, right? So.
No, actually, I think when interacting with this robot, it's always what the human thinks actually is happening is what you should take as the thing that is actually happening. So now what you could do is add something more to it and try to, use your interpretation of the robot thing into your own drawing. Okay, and you can press it again. And so in this interaction where you start to kind of play with it in a ping pong way, something in the sense of what the meaning of the drawing is can change quickly. So there's several types of interactions. Some of them are that the human and the robot are kind of fighting over the meaning. So the robot is always seeing something, but the human wants to very much do what it wants to do. Then there's the other way that the meaning is constantly changing in the interaction itself. So I might ask you the last question. And, so it's doing its first turn. And my question would be kind of pretty much just from before, if the meaning for yourself in the drawing changed or not.
Like, I mean, it changed before, and now I don't know if it's going to change again. I mean, now it hasn't changed for me. It changed like the first time. Mm-hmm. It changed the first time, but not a second time, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see that also sometimes this experiment is run against the robot and it's not sure what's happening. You're like kind of working against the machine and it doesn't really understand what you're doing. This also happens and is part of the process. And you can continue if you want. I would kind of like shift the focus onto the analysis of all the drawings that we did. So in the end, we did like 500 drawings and we analyzed them. And what sometimes happens is that, there's like a fight between the human and the robot over what is happening and this, failure of understanding each other. And what I brought here is when we analyzed the turns of the human and the robot, we have in blue is always the robotic turn and in red the human turn. And I brought you this turns of this drawing here, which is, for me, it's very interesting. So in the beginning, the robot started off with like a vertical line and it could be pretty much anything. And the human in this drawing did something very interesting. It started to draw a tree. And when you go over the interaction, you see that at some point, the robot did a second leg for me, or for the human it was kind of a leg because the human started to draw more like into a bird. And for me this is on one hand the semantic development of these images are very, very interesting and fascinating to see what happens in this interaction, but also on the other hand, if you really look at it from an algorithmic way and to just look at the morphology of the lines, you see some interesting phenomena. And what we did in this research is that we calculated values like the pixel amount of each drawing from the humans. We measured the complexity, so if it's a straight line or a curved line, and the position and orientation of the drawings. And when you do this, you get this graph that is in blue there with each turn representing a dot in a two-dimensional space of properties. And if you have 5 properties in the end, it's in 5 dimensions, of course. And when you start looking for phenomenons, you look at, okay, what happens if the robot is drawing on the very left side of the drawing? what is the human going to do? And we kind of found out that there are these rules of directions. So we mainly tested it here in European settings, so Berlin, Linz, and Magdeburg. And what we see is that the humans maintain the reading direction. So going from when the robot draws something on the very left, the human will, with statistical significance, draw on the right. But it's not the other way around, interestingly enough. And the same goes from top to bottom. So when the robot draws on the top of the image, the human is much more likely to answer on the bottom of it. Another phenomenon that we found interesting is the phenomenon that complexity and simplicity of the drawings, they kind of correlate. So when the robot is doing something very complex and a geometrical, complicated shape, the human is much more likely to answer very simple and with fewer lines. And it goes vice versa. So when the robot is doing something very simple, sometimes it happens that it's just doing a dot. The human feels kind of like provoked to do something more complex and to draw much more. And with kind of these morphological phenomena and semantic phenomena that we found, we thought about, okay, how can we further use these things that we found? And so, for example, if you want to teach a child something, how to draw a perspective or how to do a certain kind of drawing, it makes a lot of sense to take the robot and to program it in that way that it is in the beginning doing much more and drawing more complex, so that the child could follow what it should do and iteratively just take back the complexity of the robotical drawings, so that the human is or the child that is learning in that moment is doing more and more and more. And yeah, with this kind of field, it also became a question that, I mean, with the significantly impact that ChatGPT has done and the way that we interact with these AI systems, for us it became an interesting question: how do we actually want to interact with AI? So should it be that you always ask in like a chat-based manner questions and give it prompts, or do we want to interact with an algorithmic or with an AI system in a rather much more intuitive and non-hierarchical way in the realm of drawing? So to kind of wrap it up, we thought about, okay, what more interaction modes can we have? And with this robotic arm, but it's just like the physical manifestation of an AI system. And when you think about, okay, you have a shared canvas and the robotic arm can draw, you can kind of also, as I mentioned before, prompt, but you could do it just with like writing something on the canvas and the robot will photograph it, the AI system will read it, and act upon it. And in the same way, this interaction can be anything. And I would love to hear your suggestions, what you would do with this interface. So therefore, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Alessandro. And now we will have another quick sessions of discussion for 5 minutes. Anyone feeling to start? Okay.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering if you also have you also considered the possibility to apply this technology for like psychological reason? For example, we can also interpret the research or the people's behavior against robot in psychological way. So yeah, because also I'm not expert in this area, but still I yeah, so far I know, I think we already use some method for like as like a drawing or interpretation of what people draws on the paper as therapy, or to just see like the unconscious thoughts or feelings inside. Yeah, that was my question. Have you considered it, or like not really, not yet?
Is it working? Yeah, so I didn't consider it that deeply, but it's a very interesting thing that you say, actually. So I was also honored to show this robotic arm in my hometown. It's a small hometown with a lot of, it's like a city of workers. And when they came by, let's say a 40, 50-year-old person that is working in the factories there and never, or like in 10 years, never picked up a pen, and seeing this robot, kind of like the inner child came back up for this person, and he started to draw and was very fascinated and didn't want to stop. It was, for me, it was a great moment, and I felt sad because how could you not, in 10 years, not pick up a pen, and it needs a robot to motivate you. But in that sense, I see a lot of potential to get people involved and get people to express themselves, even though if they need a robot to do it or an assistant to kind of lose the fear of the blank paper. So, yeah.
So, like, continuing the same question, have you thought about like having art therapy in a way, like if a person is suffering from maybe a PTSD, post, having this as a art therapy tool, and a kind of a art buddy with you who kind of helps you to make something and forget the stuff which happened between the conflict, like a PTSD thing, so something like that.
Okay, I know not enough about psychology to dive into therapy methods, but what I can say is that when you observe two humans drawing on the same sheet of paper, when they draw together, they want to make it fun for both of them. So you kind of really try to interpret what the other person is doing, and you really want to kind of assist the other person in whatever you want to do to kind of like really show what you intend to draw together in that sense. And that's why I think, I mean, in art therapy, I think you rather, sometimes you draw alone, sometimes you draw together with the therapist, I guess. When you would draw or use a robot, the big advantage is the anonymity of the robot itself, so it doesn't judge. And you see that in these drawings when like no one is in the room and the people interact with it, they feel not obliged to someone to meet a certain whatever. So I could see something working in that way. Yeah.
I have like a question regarding like ownership of like artwork. So if like you and the robotic arm is doing an artwork, who's owning this? Like if it's like something that is worth some money, for example.
Test? Yeah. That is a very interesting question. So maybe someone here knows it. The way I treated it at the moment, or we treated it, is that people can always take it home, and it's then theirs, of course. But we also have a lot of drawings now that in our archive, and we don't know what to do. I mean, if someone would like to take one, I would give it to them. So we kind of took ownership of the drawings that people left. Otherwise, I would say it belongs to the people who created it. But generally, this is the big question of when AI is generating art, who does it belong to and how to cite AI. So yeah, maybe for the discussion part, on that.
I'd like to introduce our third speaker now, Judith Dörrenbächer. She's a Berlin-based interaction designer and researcher with a background in design theory and HCI. She explores how animist epistemologies can inform new design paradigms for social robotics and AI. And she is now currently working as postdoc in University of Siegen. Welcome, Judith.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction of myself. I'm showing something a bit different today. You won't see that many real robots in my presentation. My presentation is about performative methods, performative explorations for robot design. I started to deal with robots some years ago, mainly because of a project that was called GINA and was funded by the BMBF at that time. It was happening for more than 3 years, almost 4 years, and me and my partners, it was an interdisciplinary project, were ourselves doing research with and about 8 other development and research robotics projects. And these projects, they developed robots like that, or worked with robots like that. You see, they don't really look, they look technology-driven, like technology-driven artifacts. They sometimes are anthropomorphized, so 2 arms, 2 eyes, and the use scenarios were mainly a bit strange from the design perspective, actually. So there was, for example, a shopping robot. You were supposed to do the shopping together with the robot. You were supposed to talk to the shopping cart, to the robotized shopping cart. And there were robots that should make lonely people feel less lonely, things like that, ethical, problematic situations sometimes. And since I felt that, the context of these robots was not really considered that much, I was wondering, how could robots enable social innovation instead of just technological innovation by not just copying and thus replacing humans? So from these projects' perspective, it often was assumed that a robot would be accepted if it would behave like a human being, it would talk or pretend to have emotions the way humans have. But I wondered, are there unique qualities robots have that humans find hard to adapt? And I think we heard about some of these qualities before in the other talks. To answer this question, I referred or worked with recent or former work I did. I did my PhD about anthropological studies called New Animism, studies about indigenous communities, how they relate to non-humans, how they negotiate relations between themselves and the other, between subject and object. And I identified several interesting performative techniques, and one of them is called mimesis, also known as imitation. So here humans transform their bodies partly into that of a non-human, for example, into an animal partly, to understand the animal perspective in relation to the human perspective. So to understand similarities and also differences between themselves and the other. And I wondered, couldn't we learn a lot about these non-human robots when we transform our own bodies into robotic bodies? So what happens if we do not only anthropomorphize objects, but also technomorphize our own bodies? So I explored this method I called technomimesis. And together with my team, we created several what I call protheses that are very simple, low-tech, made out of cardboard objects that help to transform the human body into something that is quasi-robotic. So a constrained way of seeing, focus steering, moving on wheels, having a non-verbal way of communication and things like that. And then I asked the projects, these 8 projects I was working with, to slip into the roles of their robots and enact the use scenarios they were actually developing for. So here you see a robot that was supposed to work in a care facility. Here you see a cleaning robot for public spaces enacted by the CEO of its robotics company. It was communicating with light signals and it had a distance sensor, but it wasn't able to differentiate between a wall or a human. It wasn't it wasn't able to tell if it was a woman or a man standing next to it. And because of this embodied exploration we did, because of being both at the same time, human and robot, partly at least, we found several unique abilities that humans have, but we were mostly interested in the abilities robots have. For example, here in this situation, it was experienced to be a great advantage to not being able to identify women or men, elderly or young people, so the robot was not able to discriminate. I know that robots can be able to discriminate, but it really depends on how we program them. And of course, they are always patient. They don't stress us. They don't judge. We saw that with the drawings here. They don't judge, so it's easy for us to be open. Sometimes it's helpful that they are neutral they don't take sides. And it's helpful that we don't have to say thank you to them all the time, especially in care facilities, for example. It was really, you can imagine it might be an advantage if you have to say thank you 100 times a day. You maybe feel relieved if you don't have to say thank you to a robot. You don't want to say thank you to all the other objects you use at your home. You don't want to say thank you to your alarm clock that is waking you up in the morning. So why should you do that to a robot? So these were questions that were coming up, and these roboticists were, quite astonished what they learned when becoming their own robot and experiencing use scenarios from the robot's perspective. So we call these abilities in a very polemic way in our working group robotic superpowers. And if you want to find out more about these superpowers or some more performative methods, you can check this book we published. I'm a co-editor of it. And here it was mainly the result of our project Gina. There are a lot of interviews in there, several different methods. And also perspectives of lay people. But now for the remaining minutes, I really would like to share some thoughts on a more recent project. At the moment, I'm wondering how robots could change interhuman relations in public spaces. So what are the chances and challenges of human-robot interaction in public spaces? In former times, it's quite common to think about dyadic interaction, one human, one robot. But in public spaces, of course, robots are confronted with crowds and groups, and they might really change a lot here. And if you have a look at the robots that are actually dealing or existing for public spaces or tested in public spaces, they mainly deal with practical issues like cleaning, surveillance robots, they are delivery robots, things like that. But there's not a lot of research happening in how these robots change our interhuman relations. And so in a project called Mediators and Icebreakers, I was working together with theater experts, Pulk Fiktion and Forum Freies Theater Düsseldorf, where the workshop took actually place, and with Honda Research Institute being a robotics expert. And we did a workshop, a theater workshop there, and asked the question of what happens if, what could happen if robots would become part of our public spaces. But we didn't want to think about pepper and anthropomorphic robots walking around in the public, but more about robotic furniture. So what happens if these urban furnishing that is already existing becomes robotized? And we worked together with teenagers to explore this. We did this workshop with 10 young people, had a focus group in advance, talked to them about positive encounters they experience, and then we prompted them, or we gave them these prompts like, again, you see here some costumes, one could say, things that help them to transform themselves, for example, into a traffic light. And then they received cards that asked a question, and these questions, we had 10 questions, and these questions were derived from the conversations we had in the focus group before. So, for example, how could a robot help to overcome yourself and go into contact with others? And then we had these these performative explorations together with the teenagers, and came up with 10 different concepts, and I can only go into detail with 3 concepts, I guess, in a bit detail. But for example, there were reflective seating blocks. Seating blocks where people could sit on and reflect on what they see. The seating blocks themselves were blind, so they needed the help of the people sitting on them, and they helped to take on the perspective of the person who sat on the seating block before. So the seating block took on the mood of the neighborhood and tried to help people think out of another human being's perspective. Then we had these intervening walls that helped to resolve conflicts, and they did this in a non-verbal way. This was actually experienced to be the best, and it helped, sometimes even helped the former people in conflict become allies, or to become partners in crime somehow, because there was a third party involved, and then it changed the whole dynamic. And then we had these complimenting boards. They sent compliments from one person to another, but they were not just a medium, but changed what was said, and they actually invented sometimes compliments for people who are standing next by, so that when there are 2 friends standing next to each other, that not one person is receiving a compliment and then the other not. So this, of course, created a lot of questions. Do we want that? Do we have to change? How do we want to how should a counterpart like that transform what was said, and how could this help? There were several questions like that and several critical thoughts and reflections we had after our workshop, and I think we can take the time now to discuss all these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. Now we have another 5 minutes for questions specific for Judith, if anybody has one. First, you.
Hello, I have a question that based on the information that you said before, that in some chance you want to use robot to replace some activity that human doing, like for example working, and we don't have to be patient with them, right? What about if someone like try to, it's okay that if we assault them or do something terrible for them, we should think of them that they are like human, or we don't have to care about them?
Sure if I understood correctly, but I guess you refer to that when we start to treat machines or robots in a bad way, this might also change our interhuman relations, that we start to treat humans in a bad way. Yeah, this is actually something we have to consider. But I'm quite positive that we can differentiate between human counterparts and non-human counterparts. Yeah, and if we design non-human counterparts to be non-human or not human-like, there won't be these mistakes happening, I guess.
Hey, good evening. First of all, thank you so much for sharing this knowledge that you've gained over these experiments. So my question actually came up earlier in Andreas's conversation, but I think it's evolved slightly. So Andreas described tools, you described the robot as a tool, collaboration, control. By definition, I mean, a tool started as an extension of a hand. And I just think back to this text that I read by Juhani Plasma called The Thinking Hand, where he talks about how the body and the mind are kind of now dismembered, detached. And I just wonder how this translates to our interaction with robots, one. And my second part of this question is, does the hand still play a role in our relationship with robots? Or is there something else that's kind of taken the reins here?
Okay. I mean, you can join. Yeah, I think the hand will play a bigger role with robots than with LMMs, for example, because they are physical, and so this is one thing. And I wanted to say something through the first thought, but I don't really remember anymore before you said this.
The idea of the body and the mind being detached, and what repercussions that has on our thinking, because Juhani Plasma talks about the thinking hand.
Okay.
How using your hand leads to certain cognitive function and development of ideas, etc. So,
yeah, it's about, I think the difference is about the agency. So when we use tools, the agency is still coming from us. If we do something like drawing together with the robot, the thinking happens in between us and the other. So if we think of teamwork or something, this is also a way of thinking, cooperation. So I think it's a different way of doing and creating, thinking. Do you want to add?
Yeah, maybe to add on that, I think there's this kind of development of, I would call it operational robots. So you know what the robot will do or what to expect from their movements. And I feel like kind of this shift is happening where it becomes more that the robot knows what the human will do. So the interaction for example, also with this drawing exercises on a cognitive level. So the robot takes in what the human did creatively. It at some point it maybe can kind of like predict what might happen. This was also this left and right thing, but yeah, the human part cannot predict what the robot will do in this interaction, and I think this shift into this cognitive area might happen. Do you want to say something also, Andreas?
Maybe later. Yeah.
Maybe later.
Or okay,
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it opens a too big discussion. Or do we have time now for that?
Take time.
Yeah.
It's all right.
I mean, you're talking about this separation of body and mind, right? Yeah. And I think that's a big issue also with AI right now. It's just working in this. The same for the robot. It's just abstract data the robot gets. It's not really feeling, sensing in the way we feel, sense, and explore our world and environment. And I'm very critical here also what happens in this industry, because in the industry right now we have these so-called digital twins. You have just simulations of environments to collect simulated data to kind of get knowledge, but it's just knowledge of simulations, and this is then brought back to real environments. That's what's actually happening in robotics right now. Most of the stuff happening is just built on simulations, not on actual haptic, real stimulus. So maybe that's just to add. But for me, the robot itself is very interesting because it's a physical interface in between maybe two worlds. And another thing, what I saw here before was there was this interesting moment when you stopped drawing and the robot starts moving. You were like going like this the first time. And I think here it's also interesting. I mean that. First of all, of course, you see the robot drawing like a hand, but you also see this in between when he's not drawing. And I think the movement, which right now there is not so much movement happening, but I think the movement plays a very important role in between. How does the robot go to the paper? How does the robot go away from the paper? And I think this really helps us maybe also to kind of get into relation with the machine, or with that what is happening here, because that one is so, I can't feel it. It's not there. Yeah.
Sort of following up on that, you had this interesting comment right at the end, or note, that you see design as an interface discipline, and you're also critical of the current digital twin implementation. And I guess the question is, you see design as an interface between these different streams, so engineering, psychology, and computer science, etc. What would be your hope for how design, or what design could represent, how it's integrated, and what is the actual reality of it right now in your experience and context?
Mine? Yes?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to know. It's very
I do.
very frustrating, actually. I mean, I don't know how it's for Judith in the research, but it's still happening that the designers are it's still that you're in this Schublade, in this, in a very late moment you come into the processes, and it's more about this aesthetic thing, which it isn't design, not that much, I think. It's other topics. So it's really hard still, I think, that design plays this role. But maybe that's the reality. And you were asking for the hope, right? Yeah. I mean, I think I have a problem to say design is this or that. Maybe just my personal perspective. I think what I really like is to do these prototypes or these things as thinking tools. It helps me to start a conversation also with other disciplines. That's my experience from things in art, in design, in industry, whatever. At the moment we have something we can see, we can touch, we can experience together, we can talk about it. And that's something I think I really like, this doing something very quick and also using just paper, gaffer tape, whatever, it doesn't matter, but just to get by making with hands and doing something together, we start talking and we start finding a way to understand each other. I think that's making understand, maybe. And I think their design is very good for me to do stuff, to produce something, some artifacts I can think about. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. So my question is around, given the fact that within the respective presentations, this idea of looking at robots and thinking about robots is from this very utilitarian point of view that has to serve a function and work in a particular role. And even with this example of the drawing, the human goes first. I also wonder about like vice versa and maybe links into a little bit of your work. But I guess my question is almost to fast forward a couple of years where, let's say we forget what it means to be human and we have to learn, given that we've colonized these machines in a very utilitarian point of view, how do we then imagine those future interactions where actually what is being ascribed to us by the robot is what we've also taught the robots, right? As those future relationships is just something I'm thinking about. And this idea, even what she spoke about with the question of harming the robot and feeling, again, this idea of what you were speaking about, animism, right? Of like, what do we feel and to what degree? Is the robot happy to draw what we are drawing? And with AI now, the robot wants to draw more advanced and the human cannot. So who has to be patient, right? Again, these hierarchies is just something I'm thinking about.
Well, yeah, I think it's very interesting to think about these subjects, and I think who's going first? This is also something I can see in this picture, and we experience in working together with robots or artificial intelligence. I don't know. I just thought it's a very interesting aspect. I have to think a bit more how to deal with that. Yeah, maybe someone else.
It's also a good question because it's at the moment it's still humans designing these processes. So with this robot you could actually just press the button and it would go first. But what it means in this interaction is that it kind of takes the leading role, and it feels like when you actually make it go first that you follow the rules that it gives and the context that was already created. And yet before, a person designed this object. And I'm also wondering at which point aren't humans designing these processes anymore? Like how does a project look like that was produced by itself or by the AI itself in a vacuum, where it's this kind of black box, but this true black box, because at the moment it's still framed by whoever designed it or whoever created it.
And there are always human interests behind. I mean, often there are, maybe not in the projects and explorations we do right now, but if I imagine having a public robot who actually is interested in having this public robot sitting there, and it's not only about data issues, but also about what kind of society should we become together with robots, who has the power to decide what is inscribed in the robots. And I think this actually changes how we deal with them, because we said this robot is not judging, but maybe people behind this robot will judge.
There was like a really interesting point, which really spoke to me when there was like discussion about design, because like I also feel like this aesthetic part is something that is really like valuable, and like a lot of people talk about design and they talk about the aesthetics and everything, but this in between, like also like all of these disciplines that come together and talk to each other, and there's like a conversation that starts. I feel like there's like this time where now like AI is like the in between the disciplines, so pretty much like you can find or you can learn specific things easier and create tools easier and talk to other disciplines in that way. So pretty much like design has like this, or like everybody has now this opportunity to go into different disciplines in a way and open up like a conversation. What is your thought about that?
Is that a question?
Yeah, maybe right now I'm too critical about these topics, but I think it's not good that it's so easy, because it's good that something is not easy, that you have to put effort inside, and that it needs years to get to understand something, and that it maybe takes weeks to find a solution. I mean, that was my when I studied, and I really like coding a lot, and I was a very bad coder, but. I remember sometimes it was like days of struggling with a problem and try to find a solution and finding a lot of solutions, but not the solution for that problem. But it really, I learned a lot because it was so hard. It was not easy. And right now, for me, it's an issue in the education right now, because it's so easy, everything. It seems like everything easy, but I think it's not easy. But maybe that's another point. Yeah.
But there might come up new problems or new things to solve. I mean, life, not everything is easy. So, yeah, and when it comes to the design perspective, it's not only about creating a nice looking something. So this might be easy, I don't know, but really understanding complex problems and really drawing the relations or understanding the relations. I think this is not that easy yet. And this is what I experienced when working together in interdisciplinary teams, that it was still very hard for people to change the perspective and think about users, for example, in a supermarket, customers, how this would feel like to really talk to your shopping cart and ask the shopping cart very loudly to, I don't know, buy the toilet paper or something like that. So it was very strange that questions like that didn't come up before. And I think this is what designers can try to make people think in different ways, maybe.
Maybe we can have one final question. Yeah, I think so.
A few of you have talked about judgment a few times, like the lack of being judged, or the feeling of not being judged, which are two very different things. I don't quite understand that point personally. Just on the one hand, I feel like inputs, as you described at the beginning in terms of like how we define the robot, are in some ways a constant judging mechanism, like it's certainly a discretion mechanism. And I also know that I get judged constantly by GPT, and so I'm wondering the extent to which like that judgment-free zone is more a figment of our imagination of what it means to be judged rather than some sort of robotic process or algorithmic process.
Yeah, it means something different if GPT is telling me that this text is a very good text than if a human being is telling me that. So I don't feel judged in a positive or negative way, maybe, or in another, not really that. It is a different thing because I know it's not a personal. It doesn't really personally understand what the text is about or so, and doesn't. So it's a different way of judging, I think. It's also a judgment when you get numbers out of something, or it's just, but it's not really like a person. It's not really. It's hard to explain. I don't know if you understand.
Maybe to add from the experience from the experiment in the beginning with this digital interface, just to get people more engaged, I put a scoring system, and it was just an AI looking at the image and saying this looks 90% like an image from a great artist. And people took that really personal, and they tried to outscore each other. And they even had the leaderboard in this digital interface, and people just kept going to beat the high score, and they were really frustrated when it was, I made a lower boundary so it wouldn't go underneath 60, because I saw when people get 3%, they say this machine is not working and it's stupid maybe. So with judgment comes kind of frustration, but also a way of motivation. And that's just my experience from this experiment.
I think maybe categories that we are used to do not work the same way. I have to think of, we thought about a robot working on trains and telling people to turn off the music or the loudness of the music. And if the robot is telling you that, you don't feel so criticized the way you would feel when a human being would come to you and tell you that the same thing. So it's a bit, so this kind of judgment is maybe different, or this kind of conflict, the conflict becomes a different one when a robot is telling you to change your behavior.
I guess we have reached the end of our session for today, and we'd like to take this time to thank, first of all our listeners here, and also the ones who are streaming this online, and especially today's guests, Judith, Alessandro, and Andreas. Thank you for coming. We'd also like to thank the team for making this possible. From streaming to setup to organization, thank you so much. And our next Loops event will take place on 21st of June, and the speakers will be announced in 6th, will be announced in a few weeks. And for now, we invite you to continue this conversation in our bar. Thank you.